The Detroit Lions won 12 games last year and went to the NFC Championship game for the first time since 1991. They improved this roster this offseason, and not surprisingly, they were a lot of people's preseason pick to go to the Super Bowl, myself included. And while the Green Bay Packers struggled through the first half of the 2023 season, as they started off the year with a 3-6 record, they won 6 of their final 8 games and even beat the Dallas Cowboys in the wildcard round of the playoffs. Both of those teams were expected to seriously compete in 2024, and they are each off to a relatively good start, Detroit especially. And while the Packers and Lions were expected to compete, it was always a toss-up with the Bears and Vikings, and could Chicago win 8 or 9 games with a rookie quarterback, and could Minnesota even compete with Sam Darnold as their starting quarterback? Could Minnesota even win 6 games, and how would star receiver Justin Jefferson feel about potentially wasting a year in his prime? Well, they can win 6 games, and they will, and the Bears will be fine too. All of this to say the NFC North quickly became the best division in football. Each of these 4 franchises has a very bright future ahead of them, and in today's video we're going to break down the ceiling for each team and what they can do moving forward to further improve their roster. Now let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are 2-2 after a Week 4 loss to the Vikings, and while that was a frustrating loss for Green Bay, they are going to be fine and they will absolutely get back on track. Their next 4 games are at the Rams, home against the Cardinals, home against the Texans, and at the Jags. Just being honest, I would be pretty surprised if they're not at least 5-3 through 8 games. The Packers are a very well-run organization, and it starts with their head coach Matt LaFleur. After Jordan Love went down during the final minute in the Eagles game, and once it was confirmed Jordan Love would be back this season, the Packers never panicked. Pretty much everyone outside the organization said, well, it's going to be tough with Malik Willis and essentially good luck. And funny enough, the Packers went 2-0 with Malik as their starting quarterback, and with the resurrection of quarterbacks playing good on their second or even third teams in some players' cases, there's legitimate questions about Malik Willis and if he can be a guy somewhere else. Obviously, he wouldn't be in Green Bay because of Jordan Love, but he will be an interesting player in the future. During the time between the end of the Eagles game in Week 1 and the start of the Colts game in Week 2, there were people worried about the Packers starting 0-4 or even 0-5, and worrying about this team having to go something like 10-1 or 10-2 to finish the year just to make the playoffs. But Jeff Hafley and the defense stepped up against the Colts and the Titans as they allowed 24 total points in the ensuing 2 games, and the Packers offense, led by Malik Willis, looked competent, and this can all be attributed to how well run of an organization Green Bay is. For what it's worth, the impact of Joe Barry no longer being the defensive coordinator has already paid massive dividends. The Packers have forced 3 turnovers in each of the first 4 games, and their 12 turnovers defensively are the most in the league, with the Vikings at number 2 with 10 forced turnovers. Green Bay is going to be a serious threat all year long because, as simple as this sounds, they can create turnovers and they can run the hell out of the football. I would prefer in the ensuing weeks, while Jordan Love is getting back to full speed, for them to place an emphasis on running the football, like with the emphasis they did against Indy and Tennessee when Malik Willis started, and I would also say the Josh Jacobs signing is already paying off. Jacobs is currently top 10 in the NFL in rushing yards, and the Packers as a team are top 5 in rushing attempts, rushing yards, and yards per carry. When push comes to shove, they're going to be a very difficult team to beat, just like they were last year. While they have forced 12 turnovers defensively, I still think the best is yet to come for the Packers defense because they haven't been consistently getting after the quarterback the way you'd like. They are just one of 2 teams that does not have a player with double-digit pressures through 4 games, and the other is the Arizona Cardinals. The Packers got through what you would hope is the most adversity they'll face all season just fine, and they're going to be a problem all year long. The Chicago Bears are also off to a 2-2 start, and out of the 4 teams in the North, they are the team I worry about most, but I also think they're going to be fine, and I think a couple of things would go a long way for this franchise. On the surface, a 2-2 start is fine, but Caleb Williams throwing just 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions while being sacked 16 times is not good. And it's really not good when you realize Caleb is just 14 of 36 for 135 yards with 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions while under pressure. If you were wondering, he also has a passer rating of just 33.9 when under pressure. Chicago has allowed just 20 points in one game, which was against the Colts in Week 3. I know the Bears' offense has been frustrating through 4 games, and we will dive more into that in a minute, but the Bears' defense has been great. They haven't allowed 400 yards in a game and have forced at least 1 turnover in each of their first 4 games, while forcing multiple turnovers in 3 of them. They currently rank 8th in points allowed and are also 10th in defensive yards allowed. Admittedly, I am not a fan of Matt Eberflus as a head coach, and I thought it was a mistake to bring him back and to let him be the head coach during Caleb's rookie year, but he is a great defensive play caller and the results speak for themselves. Opposing quarterbacks have thrown just 2 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and with players on the defense like Montez Sweat, Jalen Johnson, Jaquan Brisker, and Gervon Dexter, they are set up to be a good defense now and for the next couple of years too. My concerns with the Bears lie within the offense, and Bears fans are already fed up with offensive coordinator Shane Waldron just a few games into the season. Out of the 4 teams in the North, and based on the first 4 games, I do think the Bears will finish last in the division, but this roster is very talented, and I very much think they are set up for success for the next few years, offensively too. DJ Moore is only 27 years old, and obviously the future is bright with Caleb Williams and first-round receiver Rome Odunze. Despite the jokes people want to make about Caleb Williams saying to Tory Taylor that he wouldn't have to punt much, being able to set your opponents up for not just one long drive in a game, but multiple drives like we saw against the Rams is a weapon too. I think the worst thing that could happen for the Bears this year would be to keep Matt Eberflus around for another year and to effectively waste another year of Caleb's development. I don't think he is the long-term answer at the coaching position, and I think he will be replaced sooner rather than later. Regardless of the coaching situation and the offensive line situation for that matter too, the Bears' floor is higher than a lot of teams because of how good their defense is. 4 of Chicago's next 5 games are against Carolina, Jacksonville, Arizona, and New England, and all 4 of those teams are going to struggle to put up points against Chicago. And if they can simply not turn the ball over, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Bears are 6-3 through 9 games. The schedule after that is particularly tough, but the Bears are very much set up for future success. The Lions are 3-1 after a 42-29 win over the Seahawks on Monday Night Football, and they are without a doubt one of the best teams in the league. For any Seahawks fans watching, yes, it is worth noting how many defensive players were down in this game, but it was nice seeing Detroit get back to the team we know they can be. They lost back in Week 2 to Tampa, which was a very frustrating loss for the Lions based on how that game was played. The Lions will have 2 big tests coming off of their Week 5 bye as they go to Dallas in Week 6 and go to Minnesota in Week 7. There's really no easy stretch of games for the Lions for the remainder of their season, and the lone 3-game stretch I would argue is between weeks 11 through 13, in which they play Jacksonville, Indy, and Chicago, 2 of which are at home. Even that's not an easy span, but the reality is this team is loaded, and they, like everyone else, has dealt with injury, and we wish everyone the best, and that's the only thing that truly worries me with the Lions. When healthy, I think this team is the best in the conference. Seattle ran 90 total plays against the Lions in Week 4, which is insane, but during the second half of that game, it seemed like Seattle would construct an 8 or 9 or 10 play drive, and Detroit would basically respond and say, that's cute, and here's a quick 5-play drive, or even the 1-play drive in which Jamison Williams had a 70-yard touchdown to put the Lions back up double digits. Now, just because I think the Lions are the best team in the NFC doesn't mean they don't have their faults either. Terrion Arnold was their first-round pick in the 2024 draft, and he's played like a rookie corner through the first 4 games. The phrase growing pains applies to Terrion, as he's been tested countless times early on, and he's accrued 8 penalties on the year. He is only 21 years old, and I don't see any way how this shouldn't be a glass-half-full approach. He's going to be battle-tested when the playoffs roll around, and he's going to have a full season under his belt at that point. Aiden Hutchinson is having an unworldly start as he has 40 pressures on the year, and to give you an idea of how dominant he's been, Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa combined have 39 pressures. Hutchinson is leading the league in pressures by 17, as Zach Allen is second and has 23 in 4 games. Aiden alone had 15 pressures against the Seahawks, and he is playing Defensive Player of the Year caliber football. If there is a concern for the Lions, it's that they don't have a legit number 2 pass rusher, and their secondary is young and inexperienced outside of Carlton Davis, but those are the 2 main weaknesses on the Lions roster, and that's mainly at the corner position. Detroit's rushing attack is going to cause problems all year long by the Thunder and Lightning duo and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, and now that they're out of their little funk offensively, they're going to continue to prove they are one of the best teams in football. It also helps when Jared Goff goes 18 of 18 in a game and the offense puts up 42 points. Detroit will wear teams down defensively over the course of a game, and as long as they don't commit multiple turnovers and as long as the defense plays average, not great, but average, they're going to win 12 games. And as of now, they are my pick to go to the Super Bowl. The Minnesota Vikings are 4-0 and sit atop of the division, and just being honest, 4 weeks ago I didn't think there was a chance that I would be sitting here and saying that, especially after a 27-point win against the Texans, and at a point in which they were up 28 points over Green Bay at Lambeau Field. If you would have told me that a month ago, there's zero chance that I would have believed that, but now I do think the Vikings have a very, very bright future for a couple of reasons, and it starts with the coaching staff. There is going to be a discussion at some point in time about what to do with Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold right now is playing at an MVP level. There is one quarterback that has at least 9 passing touchdowns on the year, and it's Sam Darnold, and he has 11. So to be 3 passing touchdowns ahead of the second place quarterback through just 4 weeks, not 15 or 16 weeks, but 4, says how good of a start to the year that Sam Darnold has had. Now, there is also going to be a conversation at some point with the Brian Flores defensive coordinator. Is he going to leave to take a head coach? There's also his situation with the league right now, and I'm not going to dive too much into that, although I do want to note that that is a point of discussion. But there are a couple of flaws with the Vikings roster that leads me to believe that they're still going to have a very bright future even after the 2024 season. The Vikings corner room is not great. Stephon Gilmore has played pretty well in 2024, even despite how old he is, but Byron Murphy is not that great, and the depth isn't really there, and they've made some key plays so far, but the corner room for Minnesota certainly isn't great. But other than that, the team is really, really good, and I would also argue that interior defensive line is certainly going to be a need this offseason, but with what Kevin O'Connell has done with Sam Darnold leads me to believe that JJ McCarthy is going to be fine. Now, I also would like to sit here and say I think it would be ignorant to just say because JJ had a good game against the Raiders in week 1 of the preseason that he's going to automatically just transition and he's going to have a great second season and that he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber player from the start because of Kevin O'Connell, because of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and a player that's yet to come back from his torn ACL and TJ Hawkinson. Now, do I think JJ's going to be good? Yes, but there's going to be growing pains similar to what Caleb Williams is going through right now, similar to what Jordan Love went through in the first half of last year, and similar to what really every young quarterback goes through. I mean, really aside from Jaden Daniels right now, but Anthony Richardson's still going through the growing pains. Will Levis has definitely been going through the growing pains, and there's going to be that point for JJ McCarthy. But the Vikings' future to me is very bright at this point in time, and I don't think they're going to relent anytime soon. I do think they will beat the Jets in London to improve to 5-0 heading into their Week 6 bye. They played Detroit and the Rams off of their bye, but after that, their schedule is not all that difficult, and there's a span where the Vikings can win 6 of 7 or maybe even 7 in a row. After the Rams game in which they play on Thursday night, they have what's called the mini bye in the NFL. They play 3 straight AFC South teams, then they play Chicago, Arizona, Atlanta, and then Chicago again, and I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the Vikings can go 6-1 during this stretch, maybe even 7-0, and they'll probably trip up at some point. I mean, Detroit might even beat them, and Detroit with their high-powered offense might even sweep them, but the point is, I do think the Vikings are going to win at least 10 games, as that would require at minimum a 6-7 record the rest of the way, and with that 7-game span that they have in the middle of the year, I think Minnesota will be just fine, and I think they will go to the postseason this year, which is not something I was really expecting at all. I thought this was going to be a 6-8 win team this year. So when you put everything together, and when you look at all of the bright spots that Minnesota's had to start the year, And when you look at the fact that they're going to have a 22-year-old second-year quarterback next year, who, again, will go through some growing pains, but with the situation he's in, I think he's going to be just fine. The Vikings have set themselves up for not just current success, but future success as well. The only real negatives that I see in the future for this team is the potential departure of Brian Flores, which hopefully the Wilf family would just throw a blank check at Brian Flores and hopefully just say, hey, whatever you want, whatever your number is, you can stay here. The Vikings' future is really, really bright, and that's not something I would have expected to say a month ago. Of course, I would have been excited about Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in the duo, but Aaron Jones has stepped up this year. Ty Chandler, I thought, has played pretty well as a second running back to Aaron Jones, and even from that standpoint, the Vikings are going to have to replace Aaron Jones at some point because he is an older running back. But what's beneficial for the Vikings is the 2025 draft class is absolutely loaded at the running back position, and the corner class is pretty solid as well. So when you look at what the Vikings are going to need in the 2025 draft, it honestly aligns with what their team needs are, and it's not always like that. So this division has become the best division in football really almost at the snap of a finger. The two wild cards in Chicago and Minnesota, well, Minnesota specifically has stepped up, and I think Chicago will step up. I just think they're going to go through a little bit more of growing pains, and I think they're going to finish the year ultimately with a 7-10, maybe an 8-9 record, but their defense is great, and they're going to keep them in a lot of games, and Caleb Williams, a month into his career, has been about what you should expect from a rookie quarterback. He's going to be fine in the long run, and I truly believe that, and I think Caleb's in a fine situation. They just need to tweak a couple of problems. Detroit and Green Bay are what they are, and they're going to continue to be what they are, especially Detroit, and this division is, to me, the best in football. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 33% of people watching are subscribed, and helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, be safe, and have a great day. Love you guys.